The front door closed at 7:20, same as every Tuesday. I heard his squash bag hit the mudroom floor, the zipper, the thud of his shoes against the wall. He came into the kitchen in gray sweatpants and that faded Michigan State sweatshirt he'd had since before we were married, and he went straight to the cabinet where he kept the good bourbon. I was at the island, chopping carrots for a soup I didn't feel like making. The house was quiet, except for the knife against the cutting board and the furnace kicking on. Tyler was back at school. Lauren was in her room on her laptop, the way she'd been every night since she moved home after graduation. Richard poured 2 fingers of bourbon into a rocks glass. No ice. He swirled it once and looked at me across the island, and I remember thinking he looked tired. Not bad tired. The tired of a man who has made a decision and is ready to deliver it. "Diane," he said, "I want a divorce." The knife stopped. I didn't put it down. I held it there, blade halfway through a carrot, and looked at him. He was leaning against the counter with his glass, weight on one hip, watching me the way you watch someone take bad news, patient, a little detached, like he'd already rehearsed whatever came next. I said, "What?" "I want a divorce," he said again. And then he laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh. That was the part I couldn't stop hearing later. It wasn't cruel or triumphant. It was relieved. The laugh of a man who has been carrying something heavy and finally set it down. He took a sip of bourbon and set the glass on the granite. "I've been talking to a lawyer," he said. "The papers will be served next week. I didn't want you to be blindsided." I put the knife down. I remember being careful about where I set it, like it mattered, like the kitchen needed to stay orderly while the rest of this came apart. 25 years, I said. "I know, 25 years. And you're telling me this over a glass of bourbon on a Tuesday." He had the decency to look at his shoes for a second, but then he looked up, and his face was open and calm and absolutely sure of itself, and that was worse than anger. "Diane, you're too old," he said. Just like that. Not in a fight. Not to hurt me. He said it the way you'd tell someone the road was closed. Factual. Almost kind. "I'm 51 years old. I've got money in the bank, and a company that's finally where I always wanted it. And I look at you, and I look at what my life is, and I feel like I'm standing in a room where all the doors closed 10 years ago." I stared at him. The carrots sat on the cutting board. The soup pot was on the stove, the water not even boiling yet. I could hear Lauren's music through the ceiling, some low indie thing she listened to. "Is there someone else?" I said. It wasn't really a question. He didn't answer right away. That was the answer. "Her name is Kristen," he said. "She works at the company. It's been going on for a while." "How long? Does it matter?" "How long, Richard?" He breathed out through his nose. 8 months. 8 months. 8 months of Tuesday squash games that weren't squash games. 8 months of late nights and business trips and long showers when he got home. 8 months of me standing in this kitchen making soup, asking how his day was. "You'll be fine," he said. He picked up his glass and took another drink. "You always land on your feet. The house is yours for as long as you need. I'll make sure you're taken care of." "Taken care of," I repeated. "Financially. I'm not going to leave you with nothing." "Generous?" He set the glass down harder than he meant to. "Diane, don't do this. Don't make it ugly. We're both adults, are we? I'm moving some things to the apartment tonight," he said. "I'll come back for the rest later. I think it's better if I'm not here while you process the apartment." He said it like I knew about it. Like there was an apartment in our marriage that I had simply failed to notice. He went upstairs. I heard him in the bedroom, hangers sliding in the closet, drawers opening and closing, the zip of a suitcase. Lauren came down at one point, looked at me standing in the kitchen and said, "Mom, you okay?" I said I was fine. She got a yogurt and went back up. The front door closed again at 8:20. The Suburban started in the garage, and then the garage door went up, and he was gone. I stood in the kitchen for a long time after that. The furnace cycled off. The water in the pot finally boiled, and I turned off the burner without putting the carrots in. I walked through the house the way you walk through a place you're seeing for the last time, even though I wasn't going anywhere. The living room with the couch we picked out in 2009, the dining table where we'd had 23 Thanksgivings, the hallway with the kids' school pictures and frames, Lauren with missing teeth, Tyler in a soccer uniform too big for him. I went into the den, where Richard kept his desk. I don't know why I went in there. I think I was looking for a pen, or maybe I just wanted to be in a room that smelled like him, which is a stupid thing to want after someone tells you you're too old. The desk was oak, heavy, the kind with drawers that stuck. I opened the top right drawer to look for a pen, and there was the usual clutter. Rubber bands, a tape measure, a handful of business cards, a folded piece of paper tucked under a stapler. I pulled it out. It was a lease. An apartment in the North Loop in Minneapolis. One of those new buildings with the glass lobby and a coffee shop on the ground floor. The tenant name wasn't Richard. It was Mercer Custom Homes, LLC. The lease started in May, 8 months ago. I held the lease in both hands and read it twice. The rent was $2,600 a month. The security deposit had been paid by a company check. His company, our company technically, though he'd never called it that. I folded it back up and slid it under the stapler exactly the way I'd found it. Then I closed the drawer and sat in his desk chair, in the dark den, and listened to the house settle around me. He had an apartment, 8 months, and he'd sat across from me at the kitchen island, drinking his bourbon, and told me I'd be fine. The papers arrived on Thursday. A process server knocked at 11 in the morning, a young guy with a beard and a Carhartt jacket, and he handed me a manila envelope like he was delivering a pizza. I signed the clipboard, and stood in the open doorway holding it while he walked back to his car. Inside was the summons, the petition for dissolution of marriage, and a document headed, Marital Termination separation agreement and proposed settlement. Richard's lawyer was a man named Gerald Pritchard, whose letterhead said he specialized in high-net-worth family law out of an office in Wayzata. I'd seen his billboard on 494. Smiling man in a navy suit, hair like a news anchor. I read the settlement at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold. Richard was offering me $50,000, one time, in exchange for waiving any claim to spousal maintenance. The house would be awarded to me, but I would have to refinance the mortgage within 90 days and pay him his share of the equity, $180,000. The business was his, sole and separate. His 401k, $480,000, was his. I kept my teacher retirement account from when I'd stopped working 22 years ago. The last statement had come in October. It was worth $32,000. I did the math on a napkin. The refinance alone would require me to qualify for a mortgage on a house worth $850,000 with no income. The $50,000 would cover closing costs and maybe 6 months of property taxes. After that, I had nothing. I called Beth. She answered on the third ring and I said, "Can you come over?" And she said, "I'm already putting my boots on." She showed up 20 minutes later with a loaf of banana bread and a bottle of red wine, even though it was 11:30 in the morning. She read every page while I sat across from her at the table. When she finished, she put the papers down flat with both hands, the way you set down something you don't trust. "Diane," she said, "don't you dare sign this." "I know. No, I mean it. This isn't a settlement. This is a robbery with a cover letter." She tapped the page. "He built that company while you were home with 2 babies. That house? You picked out every single one of those kitchen cabinets. You don't walk away with $50,000 and a mortgage you can't pay. I don't know how any of this works," I said. My voice sounded small even to me. "I don't know what I'm entitled to. I don't even know what we have." Beth pulled out her phone. "I know a lawyer. Her name's Marilyn Voss. She represented a friend of mine from book club. Her husband tried the exact same thing. Hid the boat, the cabin, all of it." Marilyn found every dime. She scrolled and held the phone out to me. "She's in Minneapolis, near the government center. I'm calling her right now." Marilyn Voss had an opening the next morning. Her office was on the 10th floor of a building on South 4th Street, overlooking the parking ramps and the gray January sky. The waiting room had 2 chairs and a fern that looked like it had seen things. Marilyn came out to get me herself, a woman in her mid-50s with short gray hair, red glasses, and a black blazer over a turtleneck. She shook my hand once, firm, and said, "Come on back." Her office was smaller than I expected, stacked with file boxes, but her desk was clean. She sat down, put on reading glasses, and read the settlement from start to finish while I sat in the chair across from her and tried not to cry. When she was done, she took off the glasses and looked at me. "Do you know where all the money is?" she said. I opened my mouth and closed it. No, Richard handles the finances. He always has. Bank accounts? I know we have a checking account. And a savings, I think. Investment accounts? Retirement? Business accounts? I shook my head. Credit cards in your name? I have a card on his account. A Visa. Marilyn leaned back in her chair. "Diane, here's what you need to understand. You were married 25 years. Everything he earned during that marriage, everything that company grew to be, the house, the retirement accounts, all of it is marital property. Minnesota doesn't care whose name is on the check. In a marriage this long, the court starts from the assumption that it gets divided fairly. And in most cases, that means roughly equally, even if I didn't earn it. Especially because you didn't earn it," she said. "You raised 2 children and ran a household so he could build a company. The law recognizes that as a contribution. Your husband knows that, by the way. This offer is designed to make you go away before you figure it out." She opened a drawer and pulled out a legal pad, wrote something and slid it across the desk. "Go home. Find every financial document in that house. Tax returns, bank statements, business records, insurance policies, the mortgage, everything. Make copies. Don't take originals out of the house, but copy everything you can find. I especially want anything related to Mercer Custom Homes. Contracts, invoices, payroll, whatever's there." I looked at the list. It was neat and specific in blue ink. "And Diane?" I looked up. "Don't sign anything. Not a single piece of paper he sends you. Not even a receipt." I nodded. I folded the list and put it in my coat pocket. And when I walked out of the building, the January wind hit my face, and I realized I'd been holding my breath for 2 days. I drove home on 394 with the heater on full blast, and somewhere around the Hopkins exit, it occurred to me that I didn't even know how much money Richard made. Not really. I knew the house payment and the grocery budget and what college cost. I didn't know the profit margins on the houses he built. I didn't know what was in the business accounts. I didn't know what I didn't know. When I got home, I went straight to the den, to Richard's desk. The drawers were still the way he'd left them. I opened the file cabinet underneath and started with the top folder. I spent the weekend going through files. It felt like archaeology. The bottom drawer of the file cabinet held tax returns going back to 2001, when Richard and I were still doing the taxes ourselves at the kitchen table with a shoebox of receipts. Above that were insurance policies, the mortgage, car titles, the kids' 529 statements. In the back of the middle drawer, I found a folder labeled Mercer Custom Homes, Early, and inside were the books I'd kept from 2002 to 2008, spiral-bound notebooks with my handwriting. Every job logged in pencil, address, contract price, materials cost, subcontractor payments, profit margin. I'd forgotten I knew how to do that. It was the credit card statement that stopped me. The December Visa bill was on Richard's desk, still in its envelope, due in January. I almost didn't open it, but I was opening everything now, so I did. Most of the charges were familiar. Home Depot, Holiday gas stations, the Adina Country Club, but there were others. $1,000. A restaurant called Manny's, $187 in October. A jeweler in the Galleria, $1,240 in November. A hotel in Cabo San Lucas, $2,100, charged the week before Christmas. We hadn't been to Cabo for Christmas. We'd been here. Richard had said he was in Chicago for a builders conference. I sat in the desk chair and stared at the statement for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and texted Richard. It was the first time I'd contacted him since he left. "We need to talk." He wrote back 20 minutes later. "About what?" I didn't answer. I drove to the Galleria and sat in the parking ramp and called the jeweler. I told them I was following up on a purchase from November and needed to confirm the item for insurance purposes. The woman on the phone asked for the last 4 digits of the card, and I gave them, and she said, "Yes, that was the David Yurman pendant, 14-karat gold, picked up November 14th. Would you like the appraisal faxed?" I said no thank you and hung up. Richard came to the house on Sunday afternoon. He let himself in with his key, like he still lived there, and he stood in the kitchen with his coat on, like he didn't want to get comfortable. I had the credit card statement on the island. "Who is she?" I said. "Diane, the jeweler. The hotel in Cabo. The apartment in the North Loop that the company pays for." "Who is she, Richard?" He stood very still. Then he pulled out a chair and sat down, which surprised me. I think he'd been planning to stand, to deliver and leave, but sitting was easier. "Her name is Kristen Bell," he said. "She's a project manager at the company. She's 32. 32. I know how that sounds. How does it sound, Richard? Because to me it sounds like you've been living a whole other life. And I was in the kitchen making soup." He rubbed his face with both hands. "I wasn't happy, Diane. I haven't been happy for a long time. You and I, we became roommates. You have your book club and your garden and I have the company, and somewhere along the way we stopped." "Don't," I said. "Don't you dare make this about us. You made a choice. You chose her. You chose to lie about Chicago and lie about the apartment and lie for 8 months while I asked you how your day was." He didn't argue. That was almost worse. I told the kids that night. I called Tyler first, because I knew he'd ask the direct questions. There was a long silence on his end, and then he said, "Are you okay, Mom?" And I said I was, and he said, "I'm coming home this weekend." Then I went to Lauren's room and sat on the edge of her bed and told her, and she cried and said, "Maybe it's just a midlife thing. Maybe you two can fix it." I didn't have the heart to tell her there was nothing to fix. After Lauren went to sleep, I went back to the den. I couldn't stop. I pulled out the business tax returns for the last 3 years and laid them next to the company bank statements I'd found in a folder. In 2002, when I kept the books, every job went through the business account. Every deposit matched a contract. Every contract was reported. The 2023 tax return showed company revenue of $3.8 million. But the bank statements showed deposits of about $3.4 million. The gap was roughly $400,000, and when I looked closer, I saw it. Deposits into a different account, a personal checking account at U.S. Bank in Richard's name only. Cash deposits and checks made out to Richard Mercer individually, not to the company. I cross-referenced the dates with building permits listed in the Adena and Minnetonka city records I could pull up on my laptop. 6 jobs. 6 custom homes where the final payment had gone to Richard personally, not to Mercer Custom Homes. The total was $380,000. I sat back in the chair. The room was dark except for the desk lamp. Somewhere in the house, the furnace clicked on. $380,000 that had never touched the company books, that had never been reported on the tax returns, that I had never known existed. I thought about Marilyn's question. "Do you know where all the money is?" I was starting to. I made a spreadsheet. I hadn't made one in 20 years, not since I was grading papers and tracking reading levels, but it came back like riding a bike. I set up columns: date, amount, source, account, corresponding job, and started entering every number I could find. I worked at the kitchen table during the day while Lauren was at the gym or out with friends, spreading documents across the surface in rows. Tax returns on one end, bank statements on the other, city permit printouts in between. The 6 off-book jobs told a clear story. Each one was a custom home where the homeowner had paid part or all of the final invoice in cash or by check, made out to Richard personally. The amounts ranged from $42,000 to $91,000. None of it appeared in the company revenue. None of it was in the joint account. It went into Richard's personal U.S. bank account, and then from there, somewhere else. I followed the money out. The transfers from the personal account went to 2 places. Some went to the North Loop Apartment Management Company. The lease I'd found in the desk, $2,600 a month. But larger amounts, lump sums of $15,000 and $20,000 at a time, went to a business account at a different bank, under a name I didn't recognize, MJK Properties LLC. I looked up MJK Properties on the Minnesota Secretary of State website. It had been registered 3 years ago. The registered agent was Richard's accountant, a man named Dale Pearson, whom I'd met twice at Christmas parties. The principal was listed as R. Mercer. I searched the Hennepin County property records under MJK Properties. There was one asset, a condominium in the Mill District of Minneapolis, 2 bedrooms, purchased 2 years ago for $390,000. The down payment, $90,000, had come from the MJK account. The mortgage was in the company name. I sat with that for a while. A second apartment, not the North Loop rental, a condo he owned, through a shell company, $90,000 down, in a building where the units had floor-to-ceiling windows and a rooftop deck. I pulled up the old listing photos. Granite countertops, stainless appliances, a balcony facing the river. It was nicer than our house. I called Marilyn on Wednesday and told her what I'd found. There was a silence on her end, the kind that means a lawyer is deciding how to explain something carefully. Diane, she said, what you're describing is not just hiding assets in a divorce. The unreported income, the shell company, the condo purchased with untaxed money, that's tax fraud. If we present this in court, it won't just affect the divorce. The IRS will see the court filings. They may open an audit. Richard could face back taxes, penalties, possibly criminal referral. I understand. Do you? Because I need you to understand that this is a one-way door. Once we file this, you can't unfile it. Your husband could lose more than the divorce. He could lose the company. I looked out the kitchen window. The backyard was covered in snow. The garden beds I'd built in 2015, nothing but white humps under the drifts. He used our money to buy another woman an apartment, I said. He used the company we started in our garage. I don't think I care what happens to him. All right, Marilyn said. But I want you to take a few days and sit with it. This isn't a decision to make angry. I told her I would. I didn't. It was Thursday evening when Richard came to the house. He was supposed to pick up more of his clothes. He'd texted that morning, and I'd said fine. I was in the den at his desk, with the spreadsheets on my laptop and documents spread across the surface. I'd been so focused that I didn't hear the garage door. He appeared in the den doorway. He saw the bank statements, the tax returns, the property records, my laptop screen with the MJK Properties website open. His face went through something fast. Surprise, then calculation, then anger. What the hell is this? He said. I didn't close the laptop. I'm getting organized. You're going through my personal files? My business files? They're in our house. On our desk, in a marriage of 25 years. Those are confidential business records. He stepped into the room and started gathering papers, stacking them roughly. You don't know what you're looking at. You don't understand construction accounting. Diane, you're going to misinterpret something and embarrass yourself. $380,000, I said. His hands stopped. 6 jobs. Final payments made out to you personally, deposited into your U.S. bank account. Transferred to MJK Properties, which bought a condo in the Mill District. $90,000 down. He stood up slowly. His face had changed. The anger was still there, but under it I saw something else. Fear, maybe, or just the recognition that the woman he'd left in the kitchen with her soup pot was not the same woman sitting at his desk. Stay out of the business, he said, quiet and hard. I'm warning you. You're warning me? This is my company. I built it. You answer phones for 2 years in a garage and suddenly you're a CPA? Stay out of it, Diane. I'm not going to tell you again. He picked up the stack of papers he'd gathered and walked out. I heard him in the bedroom, yanking drawers open, and then the front door slammed hard enough to rattle the pictures on the wall. I looked at the desk. He'd taken some of the bank statements, but he hadn't taken the laptop, and he hadn't noticed the folder on the floor by the wastebasket, the one I'd already copied, every page. At the FedEx office on France Avenue, I picked up my phone and texted Marilyn, I don't need a few days. File it. He hit back the way a man like Richard hits back, with money. The Visa card was declined at Lund's on Saturday. I was buying groceries, standing in self-checkout with a cart full of milk and eggs and bread for Lauren and me, and the machine made that flat buzzing sound and the screen said, declined. I tried it again. Same thing. The woman behind me sighed. I paid cash, and when I got home I called the credit card company. They told me the primary cardholder had removed me as an authorized user effective Friday. Then I checked the joint checking account online. The balance was $412. On Thursday it had been $9,000. He'd moved the money. I couldn't see where. The transfer just said internal. I called Marilyn. She didn't sound surprised. It's a common tactic, she said. He's trying to make you feel desperate so you'll sign the first offer. Don't. I'm filing a motion for temporary relief on Monday. Spousal maintenance, attorney fees, and an order preventing him from dissipating marital assets. In the meantime, do you have access to any cash of your own? I had the old teacher retirement account, but touching it meant penalties. I had about $600 in a personal savings account I'd forgotten about until that morning. Opened when I was 22 with babysitting money. I'll manage, I said. Beth brought over groceries on Sunday and wouldn't let me pay her back. Tyler texted that he was taking the semester off to come home, and I told him absolutely not, that I was fine, that he needed to stay in school. He didn't answer for 2 hours, then texted, Mom, I'm not asking. The hearing was on Wednesday at the Hennepin County Family Justice Center, a building that smells like floor wax and anxiety. Richard was there in a dark suit with Gerald Pritchard, who looked even smoother in person than he did on the billboard. Marilyn and I sat at one table, Richard and Pritchard at the other. The judge was a woman in her 60s, with silver hair and reading glasses on a chain. Marilyn presented the numbers. The joint account drained. The credit card canceled. My lack of income. Richard's company revenue. Pritchard argued that Richard had reallocated funds for business purposes, and that I was capable of employment. The judge looked at me over her glasses. Ma'am, when did you last work outside the home? 2004, I said. I was a third-grade teacher. She turned to Richard. Mr. Mercer, you earned the income in this marriage for 22 years while your wife raised your children and managed your household. You don't get to turn off the money because you filed for divorce. I'm ordering temporary spousal maintenance in the amount of $4,000 a month, retroactive to the date of filing. I'm ordering you to pay $20,000 toward Mrs. Mercer's attorney fees within 14 days. and I'm issuing an injunction against any further transfer, concealment, or dissipation of marital assets. Do you understand? Richard's jaw tightened. Yes, Your Honor. We walked out into the hallway. Pritchard went ahead, already on his phone. Richard stopped in front of me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, the one I'd bought him for our 20th anniversary. You think you won something, he said, low. You didn't. I built this company. I built this life. You were just... He gestured at me, at my coat, my whole self. You were just here. He walked away. I stood in the hallway with Marilyn's file folder against my chest and let the words land. You were just here. It was worse than too old. Too old was about my body. Just here was about my entire life. Marilyn touched my arm. Come on, I'll buy you coffee. That night I couldn't sleep. I got up at 2 and went into the den, not to work, but just to sit. I opened Richard's desk drawer looking for a tissue, and my hand hit something in the back, behind the rubber bands and the tape measure. A small brass key on a wire ring. A piece of masking tape was wrapped around the bow, and on the tape, in Richard's handwriting, it said, Public Storage, Unit 417. I held the key in my palm. It was warm from being in the drawer. Public Storage had a facility on France Avenue, 10 minutes from the house. I'd driven past it 100 times. I'd never known Richard had a unit there. I closed my hand around the key and sat in the dark. I went to Public Storage on Friday morning. The facility was one of those long rows of roll-up doors behind a security gate, the kind you see from the highway and never think about. The key worked at the gate, and the office gave me no trouble when I gave them the unit number and my name. I was still Mrs. Mercer. The unit was in Richard's name, but in Minnesota, spouses have a right to access marital property. Marilyn had confirmed that before I went. Unit 417 was in the 3rd row. I put the key in the padlock, turned it, and lifted the roll-up door. It rattled and bounced, and then I was looking at the contents of a life I didn't know about. There were 3 cardboard file boxes against the back wall, stacked on top of each other. Next to them was a set of golf clubs I'd never seen, a flat-screen TV still in its box, and a leather duffel bag. I went straight for the files. The top box was labeled 2022. Inside were manila folders organized by job, addresses I recognized from houses Richard had built, names I knew from the country club. But the folders didn't have the official invoices. They had handwritten ledger sheets, Richard's handwriting, not mine, listing cash payments, job by job, line by line, date, amount, payer, cash, or CK to RM. The totals matched what I'd found in the bank records. The second box was 2023. The third was 2024, the year still in progress. 3 years, $380,000, logged in his own hand. Under the ledgers in the 2023 box, I found the lease for the North Loop apartment, the original, not a copy, made out to Mercer Custom Homes. Tucked in the folder was a photograph, Richard and Kristen on a beach, both in swimsuits, her arm across his stomach, both squinting into sun that was clearly not Minnesotan. The Cabo trip. She was younger than me by 16 years, and she looked exactly like what she was, a woman who thought she'd found a successful, generous man. At the bottom of the 2024 box, in a folder marked Dale, I found a printed email chain between Richard and his accountant, Dale Pearson. The first email was from Richard, sent 2 years ago. Dale, the cash jobs need to stay off the company books going forward. I'll send you the numbers at year end, and we can figure out how to handle the MJK distributions. Don't mention this to Diane. Dale's reply, understood. I'll keep them separate. I sat on the concrete floor of the storage unit with the email in my hand, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger, clarity. The anger was there, but under it was a cold, clean clarity, like the air outside after a snowstorm. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a midlife crisis that got out of hand. This was premeditated. He'd sat down and written an email that said don't mention this to Diane, and his accountant had said understood. And for 3 years, they'd run a second set of books while I planted tomatoes and hosted book club. I took photos of everything with my phone, every ledger page, the lease, the photograph, the email. Then I put it all back exactly the way I found it, closed the roll-up door, and locked it. I drove to Marilyn's office. She looked at the photos on my phone, one by one, and when she got to the email, she blew out a long breath. This is the whole case, she said. The ledgers prove the income. The email proves intent. The lease and the photo prove he was spending marital assets on an affair. If we present this, the judge won't just divide the estate. She'll consider Richard's dishonesty as a factor. You could get more than 50%. And the IRS? Marilyn set the phone down. The IRS will see it. The second ledger is evidence of unreported income. Once it's filed with the court, it's a public record. Richard will almost certainly face an audit. He could be on the hook for back taxes, penalties, interest. Depending on how the U.S. Attorney's Office feels about it, there could be criminal referral. Kristen, I said. Does she get dragged into this? She's mentioned in the lease. She may be deposed, but she's not liable for his taxes unless she filed fraudulent returns with him. I nodded. I thought about the photograph. Kristen on the beach, her arm across his stomach, looking like she believed every word. She wasn't my problem, but she wasn't my enemy either. I need you to ask me something, I said. Marilyn waited. Ask me if I'm sure. Are you sure? I looked at the phone screen, at Richard's handwriting on the ledger, at the words don't mention this to Diane. I've been invisible in my own marriage for 25 years, I said. First he told me I was too old. Then he told me I was just here. If I I walk away now, he gets to be right. Violet, Marilyn, all of it. She nodded once. I'll start drafting the motion this afternoon. I walked out of the building into a bright January day, the sky so blue it looked painted, and my breath made clouds in front of my face. I wasn't cold. Marilyn filed the motion on a Tuesday. It was 47 pages, with exhibits, the second ledger photographs, the MJK Properties records, the Mill District condo title, the North Loop lease, the Cabo photograph, and the email to Dale Pearson. She served Pritchard by email at 2 in the afternoon. Pritchard called Marilyn at 9 the next morning. I know because Marilyn called me afterward, and she was trying not to laugh. He had no idea, she said. None. He kept saying, "What second ledger? What shell company?" I believe him, Diane. Your husband didn't tell his own lawyer about the cash jobs or the condo. Pritchard is a very good divorce attorney, but he can't defend against evidence his client hid from him. The effect was immediate. Pritchard filed a response asking for 2 weeks to review and evaluate the new documentation. The court gave him 10 days. On the 9th day, he sent a new settlement offer. It was better. Not fair, but better. The $50,000 became $200,000. The house would be awarded to me with no requirement to refinance for 12 months. Richard would pay spousal maintenance for 2 years, $3,000 a month. The 401k would be split 60-40 in his favor. The business remained his, and there was a non-disclosure agreement. 20 pages of it. I would agree never to disclose the existence of the second ledger, the MJK Properties account, the unreported income, or the email to Dale Pearson to any third party, including, specifically the Internal Revenue Service. I would agree not to discuss the terms of the settlement with anyone except my attorney and my accountant. If I breached, I'd return the $200,000 and pay damages. I read it at Marilyn's desk. When I finished, I set it down. He's offering me money to cover up his tax fraud, I said. Yes, Marilyn said. He is. $200,000 for my silence. Essentially. Did he think I'd say yes? Marilyn took off her glasses and cleaned them with a tissue, which I'd learned was her way of choosing words carefully. He thinks you're the woman he married, the woman who didn't ask questions about finances, the woman who made soup and didn't look in drawers. That woman might have signed this. I pushed the offer back across the desk. No, Diane, no, I don't want his hush money. I want half. I want half of everything. The house, the business, the retirement, all of it. And I want the court to see what he did. Marilyn put her glasses back on. Then we go to the hearing. I want you to understand that court is unpredictable. The judge could give you more than half because of his dishonesty. She could give you exactly half. She's not going to give you less than half. Not with this evidence. But there are no guarantees. I understand. All right. I'll notify Pritchard that the offer is rejected and we'll see court on the 27th. I told Lauren that night. She was sitting at the kitchen table eating takeout, and I told her I'd turned down a settlement and was going to court. She put her chopsticks down. Mom, $200,000, she said. That's a lot of money. What if you lose? I'm not going to lose. But what if you do? What if the judge doesn't see it your way? Dad has a really good lawyer. Your dad lied on his financial affidavit. He hid $380,000. He bought another woman a condo with money he never reported. The judge is going to see all of it. Lauren looked at her food. It's a lot of drama. Couldn't you take the money and be done? Start over? I don't want to see you get hurt. I reached across the table and touched her hand. I know you don't. But taking the money means letting him get away with it. It means signing a piece of paper that says I'll keep his secrets. I've kept his secrets for 25 years. I'm not doing it anymore. She didn't say anything else, but she didn't pull her hand away. Tyler called that night. He'd heard from Lauren, and he was furious. Not at me, at the offer. He's trying to buy you, Mom. Don't take it. I'm not. Good. I'm coming home for the hearing. Tyler, I'm not asking, remember? I was in bed at 11 when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Richard. The first one since the day I'd confronted him about Kristen. Can we talk? Just the two of us. No lawyers, please. I stared at the screen for a long time. The please was new. Richard didn't say please. Not to me. Not anymore. I typed back, where? Perkins. On France. Tomorrow at 2. Bring your lawyer if you want. But I'd rather it just be us. I set the phone down. I knew what Marilyn would say. She'd say, don't go. Don't meet him without representation. Anything you say can be used. But I'd spent 25 years letting Richard set the terms of every conversation. I wanted to have one where he didn't. I texted back, I'll be there. The Perkins on France Avenue was the kind of place where retired men drank coffee at 8 in the morning and families ate pancakes after church. At 2 o'clock on a Thursday, it was half empty, quiet except for the clink of silverware and a radio playing oldies low in the kitchen. I got there first and took a booth by the window, ordered coffee. The waitress brought it in a ceramic mug with a chip on the rim. Richard arrived 5 minutes later. He was wearing jeans and a pullover, not a suit, which told me he was trying to look casual, unthreatening. He slid into the booth across from me and ordered coffee too, black. And when the waitress left, he folded his hands on the table and looked at me with an expression I recognized from the early years. Earnest, open, the face he used to wear when he wanted something and knew I might say no. Thank you for coming, he said. You said please. I did. He half smiled. You look good. I don't. I wasn't being self-deprecating. I looked tired. I had circles under my eyes and I was wearing the same sweater I'd worn on Tuesday. What do you want, Richard? The smile faded. He stirred his coffee even though there was nothing in it. I want us to settle this without going to court. The offer on the table is fair, Diane. $200,000, the house, maintenance, with a gag order. The NDA is standard. It protects both of us. It protects you from the IRS. He set the spoon down. Do you know what happens if those ledgers go to a judge? The IRS comes in. They audit the company. They audit me personally. They could audit you too. Did your lawyer tell you that? We filed joint returns. You're on the hook for any tax liability just as much as I am. I'd known that. Marilyn had told me. Innocent spouse relief was possible, but it wasn't guaranteed. I'd thought about it. I'd thought about it a lot. I'll take that risk, I said. Why? His voice cracked a little, and for a second I saw something real in him. Not anger, not charm, but genuine confusion. Why would you risk all of that? For what? To punish me? To prove a point? Because you told me I was just here. He blinked. You said I was just here. 25 years, Richard. I was 23 years old when we got married. I answered the phones in the garage. I painted trim on the weekends. I went to every open house. I picked out every cabinet and every light fixture in every model home for the first 10 years. Then I had Lauren and Tyler, and I stayed home and I raised them. And I ran this house and I made dinner and I went to PTA meetings and I did all of it. So you could be the big success story at the country club. And you looked at me in that hallway and you said I was just here. My voice didn't shake. I'd practiced this in the car, but it didn't sound practiced. It sounded like the truth. Richard looked out the window. The parking lot was full of slush. I wasn't happy, he said quietly. I'm 51 years old. I wake up every morning and my back hurts and I look in the mirror and I don't recognize the guy. And Kristen, she doesn't see the gray hair and the bad knee. She sees the guy who builds big houses and makes things happen. She makes me feel like I still have time. You're scared of getting old, I said. Aren't you? I thought about it. I'm 48. I found a gray hair last week and I earned it. You want to know the difference between us? I'm not trying to buy my way out of it. You're chasing 32 because she doesn't know you yet. She doesn't know you leave your socks on the floor or that you can't cook eggs or that you cry at the end of Field of Dreams. She doesn't know you because you haven't let her. When she does, you'll need a 26-year-old. He didn't say anything. The waitress came by and topped off our coffee. The MJK investors, he said after a while, almost to himself. Pritchard says if the ledgers come out, they'll pull the funding on the Medina project. The whole thing could collapse. I went very still. Investors? He looked up. And I saw in his face that he hadn't meant to say it. The charm had slipped. The self-pity had loosened his tongue, and he'd said something real. MJK has investors? I said. Diane, the shell company you used to buy the condo. It has investors. Who? He was already shaking his head. It's complicated. It's a real estate partnership. Dale set it up. Dale Pearson. Your accountant. He's not just the registered agent. He's a partner. Richard's silence was the answer. I picked up my coat from the booth. Dale Pearson helped you hide $380,000 and run a shell company, and he's an investor in MJK. Does Pritchard know that? Stay out of this, Diane. You're not in a position to tell me what to stay out of, Richard. I slid out of the booth. I'll see you in court. I walked out into the parking lot. The cold hit my face and I didn't care. I got in the Subaru, the old Outback I'd driven for 8 years, the one Richard called the mom car, and sat there with the engine off. MJK had investors. Dale Pearson wasn't just an accountant following instructions. He was a partner. The second ledger wasn't just Richard's secret. It was a conspiracy. I called Marilyn. She answered on the second ring. MJK has investors, I said. Dale Pearson is one of them. Richard just told me. There was a pause. He told you that? He didn't mean to, Marilyn breathed out. That changes things. If Pearson is a partner in the shell company, he's not just a witness. He's potentially liable. We can depose him. We can subpoena the MJK bank records. Diane, this just got bigger. The hearing is next week. I know. Let me make some calls. I'll see you Monday. I hung up and started the car. The heater groaned and blew cold air, then warm. I pulled out of the Perkins lot and drove home, and for the first time since the night Richard left, I didn't feel like I was catching up. I felt like I was ahead. The hearing was on a Monday in the Hennepin County Family Justice Center, in a courtroom with fluorescent lights and wood paneling that had been fake grained sometime in the 1980s. The gallery had wooden benches that were harder than they looked. Tyler sat in the back row, wearing a button-down shirt he'd clearly ironed himself. Beth was next to him, holding her purse in both hands like a shield. Richard was at the respondent's table with Pritchard, who wore a suit that cost more than my first car. Richard had on the navy one, the one he wore to closings, and he sat with his shoulders back, his jaw set, the picture of a successful man being unfairly dragged into court. Kristen wasn't there. I'd wondered if she would be. Judge Patricia Alvarez came in at 9 o'clock sharp, sat down, and looked at the stack of motions in front of her like she'd already read every page. Pritchard went first. He was smooth. I'll give him that. He talked about contentious litigation and emotional responses, and how Mrs. Mercer had removed and copied confidential business records from his client's home office. He characterized the MJK Properties documents as a legitimate real estate investment structure, and suggested that the handwritten ledgers were incomplete notes taken out of context. He didn't mention the cash. He didn't mention the email. He painted me as a hurt wife lashing out at a husband who'd had the nerve to leave. Then Marilyn called Richard to the stand. He swore on the Bible and sat down, confident, crossing one leg over the other. Marilyn stood at the podium with her notes. Mr. Mercer, did you file a financial affidavit in this proceeding on January 14th? I did. In that affidavit, Did you swear under oath that you had made a full and fair disclosure of all your assets, income, and financial interests? Yes. Did you disclose the existence of MJK Properties LLC? Richard glanced at Pritchard. MJK is a separate business entity. It's not a marital asset, Your Honor, Marilyn said, turning to the judge. I have here the certificate of organization for MJK Properties LLC, registered 3 years ago during the marriage, listing the petitioner, Richard Mercer, as principal. She handed a copy to the bailiff. Mr. Mercer, did you disclose MJK on your affidavit? No. Did you disclose the condominium at 215 Park Avenue in Minneapolis, owned by MJK Properties and purchased for $390,000? No. Did you disclose $380,000 in payments made to you personally by clients of Mercer Custom Homes over the last 3 years? Payments not deposited into the company account and not reported on the company tax returns. Richard's posture changed. His leg uncrossed. He leaned forward slightly. That's a misunderstanding of how construction accounting works. Some clients, did you disclose those payments, Mr. Mercer? No. Marilyn set down the paper she was holding and picked up another. I have here a handwritten ledger, found in a storage unit rented by you, listing cash and personal check payments for 6 separate construction projects between 2022 and 2024, totaling $380,000. Is this your handwriting? She handed the ledger to the bailiff, who took it to Richard. He looked at it. His face did something complicated. It's notes, he said. Is it your handwriting? Yes, but I also have an email sent by you to your accountant, Dale Pearson, dated March 3, 2022, in which you instruct him to keep, quote, the cash jobs off the company books going forward, and specifically state, don't mention this to Diane. Do you recall writing that email? Pritchard stood up. Objection. Foundation overruled, Judge Alvarez said. The witness may answer. Richard was holding the ledger in both hands. He looked at it like it was something alive. The color was draining from his face, starting at his jaw and moving up. I watched it happen, the confidence going out of him like air from a tire, his mouth slightly open, his eyes on the email Marilyn was now handing to the bailiff. Mr. Mercer, the judge said. Do you recall sending that email? He cleared his throat. Yes, I sent it. Did you in fact keep cash payments off the company books? On the advice of my accountant. Answer the question. Yes. The room was very quiet. Somewhere in the hallway, a door closed. Marilyn presented the rest of it. The North Loop lease paid by the company, the Cabo charges, the MJK bank records showing the $90,000 down payment on the condo. Each document went to the judge through the bailiff. Pritchard objected twice more, half-heartedly, and was overruled both times. Richard sat on the stand and got smaller. When Marilyn finished, Judge Alvarez looked at Richard for a long time. Mr. Mercer, she said, you filed a sworn financial affidavit in my courtroom that omitted $380,000 in income, a shell company, and a condominium. You instructed your accountant to hide income from your wife and from the government. Do you understand that lying on a financial affidavit is perjury? Richard's voice was quiet. Yes, Your Honor. I'm ordering a full and complete amended financial disclosure within 14 days, including all MJK Properties records and all personal accounts. I'm awarding Mrs. Mercer 55% of the marital estate in light of your intentional concealment. I'm ordering you to pay all of her attorney fees and costs, and I'm referring the matter of the unreported income to the appropriate authorities. She banged the gavel once. We're done. Richard stood up when the judge left. He looked at Pritchard, but Pritchard was already packing his briefcase, his face a stone wall. Then Richard looked at me. He crossed the aisle, and for a second I thought he was going to yell. Instead he said in a voice I barely recognized, What do you want? I stood up. Tyler was behind me now. I could feel him there, but I didn't turn around. I want half, I said, and I want you to say I was there. He stared at me. His mouth opened and closed. He didn't say it. He couldn't. I picked up my coat and walked out of the courtroom with my son and my best friend, and I didn't look back. The snow melted in April. It always does, eventually. But that year, I watched it like I'd never seen it happen before. The gray piles shrinking along the driveway. The garden beds reappearing under the slush. The first green shoots of the tulips I'd planted in October pushing through the mud. The divorce was final on April 11th. The settlement was everything Marilyn had said it would be. The house was sold. It went on the market in March and closed in 3 weeks, over asking, because the housing market in Edina was still hot, and Richard had built a good house, even if he'd built it on 2 sets of books. I got 55% of the equity, 55% of the company valuation, half the 401k, 4 years of spousal maintenance, and my attorney fees. The total was more than I'd ever had in my own name in my life. It was also less than I deserved, but Marilyn said that was how it worked. You didn't get the years back. You got a number. The IRS came. I don't know all of it, and I don't ask. The court records triggered an audit, and Richard's tax returns for 2022, 2023, and 2024 were pulled. The last I heard, through Marilyn, he was facing back taxes and penalties in the 6 figures, and had been forced to sell 2 spec homes to cover it. Dale Pearson was under investigation too. The Medina project, the one with the MJK investors, collapsed when the investors pulled out after the shell company became a court record. Kristen left in February. She didn't call me, and I didn't expect her to. But she gave a statement to Marilyn's investigator, confirming she'd had no knowledge of the second ledger, or the unreported income, and she moved back to Wisconsin to live with her sister. Richard's North Loop apartment lease ended in March. The Mill District condo was sold as part of the asset division. I don't know where he lives now. Somewhere smaller, I imagine. I rented a 2-bedroom apartment in a brick fourplex in St. Louis Park, 10 minutes from Beth. It had a balcony facing east, and a kitchen the size of a postage stamp, and I loved it the moment I walked in. I bought a used Honda CR-V with 32,000 miles on it. Gray, the first car I'd ever bought by myself. I wrote the check, and the finance manager shook my hand, and I drove off the lot and laughed out loud, alone in the car, because I was 48 years old, and I'd never bought a car before. Richard had always handled it. I enrolled in an accounting certificate program at Minneapolis Community and Technical College, 2 nights a week and Saturdays. I was the oldest person in most of my classes, and I was also the only one who already knew how to read a construction ledger. It turned out I was good at it, not just the numbers, but the pattern of them, the way a set of books told a story if you knew where to look. Word got around. Beth told a friend, and that friend told another friend. And by May, I was sitting at my kitchen table on Saturday mornings with women from Medina and St. Louis Park and Hopkins, women whose husbands handled the money and who were getting divorced and didn't know a balance sheet from a bed sheet. I didn't charge them. I just helped them organize documents and understand what they were looking at, and I told them what Marilyn had told me. Don't sign anything until you know what you have. Tyler went back to Indiana in February after the hearing. He called every Sunday. He was studying finance now, which made me laugh. Lauren got a job in marketing at a small agency in the North Loop and moved into an apartment with 2 roommates in Uptown. She came to my place for dinner on Sundays, and she didn't talk about Richard, and neither did I. She was figuring it out in her own time. It was a Saturday in late May when I saw him. I was at the Target in Minnetonka, buying a new shower curtain and a bag of potting soil for the balcony, and I turned into the cereal aisle, and there he was. He was thinner. The navy suit was gone. He wore khakis and a windbreaker, and his hair was shorter and grayer, like he'd stopped coloring it. He was holding a box of Cheerios, and he looked like a man who had not expected to see me and was trying to decide whether to say hello. I almost kept walking, but I stopped, because I wasn't angry anymore, and I didn't want to be the kind of woman who crossed the street to avoid her ex-husband in a cereal aisle. Richard, I said. Diane. He shifted the Cheerios to his other hand. You look good. Thank you. There was a pause. A kid wailed somewhere in the store. A cart rattled past. I heard about the company, I said, because it was the only thing I could think of that wasn't cruel. He nodded. It's been a year. I know. I'm sorry, he said. It came out awkward, like he was trying out words he didn't use often. About all of it. The apartment. The money. The things I said. I looked at him. Really looked at him. In his windbreaker. Holding his Cheerios. Under the fluorescent lights of a Target on a Saturday. He was 51 years old and he looked older. He looked like a man who had lost the thing that made him feel young, and discovered that the thing underneath was just a man who couldn't cook eggs and cried at Field of Dreams. Thank you, I said. I hope you're okay. I didn't say I forgave him. I didn't, but I didn't need to. I pushed my cart past him and toward the checkout. The automatic doors opened, and the May air hit my face, warm and green and full of the smell of cut grass. I loaded the shower curtain and the potting soil into the back of the CR-V and got in the front seat. I sat there for a moment, looking at myself in the rearview mirror, gray roots coming in, no makeup, lines around my eyes that I'd earned. I smiled. Not a big smile, just a small one, private, the kind you give yourself when you know something you didn't know before. Then I started the car and drove home.